Hi, I'm Amanda Hickey, and I'd like to talk a bit about what it's like to write a book and then find yourself living through something extremely similar. So, a few years ago, I wrote this book. Before this is over, it was published in hardback a couple of years ago in the US, and it's just being published in paperback now. And it deals with a pandemic, not unlike the one we're living through right now. And in the first weeks, certainly it was a pretty spooky experience to be seeing things that I've pretty much written about happening around me. And I had this kind of really disconcerted, this can't be happening feeling. And I think, like a lot of people, I was quite kind of thrown by what was going on, and I wasn't sure how to prepare to be ready for what was coming. Even though my characters had been through exactly this, and they were much more prepared than I was. But at the same time, this kind of book doesn't usually get field tested like this. And so there was a bit of my brain that was kind of observing and sitting above it going, oh, I got that right, I got that wrong. So it was this really kind of disconnected, kind of split feeling when I was going through it. And although my disease is made up, it's a lot of the experiences aren't that dissimilar from what's actually been happening. And what I wanted to write about was about ordinary people, because most people aren't scientists or doctors, although they're incredibly important during something like this. But most of us are actually going to experience this the way we have, by having to worry about what we can touch and whether we can leave our house, and looking at the numbers each day to see what's happening and how many people are sick. Um, I also knew that there wouldn't be a vaccine in the short term to get my characters out of it. That vaccines take, years, not weeks. And so that also kind of led to the best course of action being to stay in. There are a few things that surprised me a bit. Part of it is just that had finished writing this book about 2012. And so the internet in Sydney, in Australia, was very different from what it's like now for us. And I know it's been a really terrible time for a lot of people. A lot of people have lost their lives. People have lost loved ones under really difficult circumstances, and people have lost their livelihoods. But the internet meant that a certain amount of society could go on. We could keep in contact with each other in a way that just wasn't possible for my characters. Um, Another difference is the book is a lot about moral dilemmas. But the scale of the moral dilemmas that we faced are quite different from in my book. In my book, it's about whether you should let the 3-year-old from next door in, and what that means for you and what that means for her, if you do or you don't. Whereas what we've been dealing with is things like, how do we look after the people who have been disproportionately affected by what we've had to do as a society to deal with this. Um, there are things that took me by surprise, like flatten the curve. It went here in Sydney anyway from being pretty much unthinkable one week to, well, of course that's what we've got to do the next. And for me, that was very much about what we do for each other and not for ourselves. So unlike my characters, I feel like we've stayed in to help each other rather than to help ourselves.